Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. On behalf of Datin Paduka Mother Mangalam, President of Pure Life Society, the Center for Spirituality, the Interfaith Spiritual Fellowship, and the organizing committee, I welcome you. My name is Anita, and I'll be your host this evening. I am a writer and I've worked on several books. Some of the ones that people are aware of are my novels like Banana Leaf Men and most recently The Age of Smiling Secrets. While fiction remains my passion, I do collaborate with others on other projects like Vaidya C.D. Sibi's best-selling book Knowledge of Life, Tales of an Ayurveda Practitioner in Malaysia. That's enough about me. Let's proceed. Our speaker tonight is Mr. Gopinath Nagaraj. Mr. Gopinath is a marine biologist with over 40 years of experience in managing marine environment, aquaculture, and fisheries. His work, which has been both in Malaysia and outside Malaysia, has given him a unique insight into the manner in which the aquatic environment operates. This includes how this underwater world relates to our well-being. As you are aware, the topic we're discussing tonight is called Viruses and Mother Nature. It is this relationship between them within the broader context of the relationship between microbes and human well-being that will focus on more time. I will now yield the floor to our speaker. Mr. Gopinath, over to you.
Thank you, Anita, for the kind introduction. Sorry? Okay. First of all, acknowledge a couple of things before we start. First thing is, I'm not a microbiologist, I'm not a virologist, and whatever I know is basically from my experience in the marine environment, the aquatic environment. This is not a technical presentation on these subjects, no, just some musings on how they fit into the larger realities that we continuously neglect. And another acknowledgement I have to make is to Google Images. I got lots of pictures of fish. I'm not going to bore you with them. And finally, some special thanks to my colleague, Ms. S.S. Punes, who's probably on the line here listening to me. Hi, Punes, and Sylvian van der Hagen, both of whom reviewed this presentation. In short, if you don't like this presentation, it's all their fault. Okay, now, the first thing I'd like to bring up is what human beings truly fear. First thing is we fear that which we cannot understand, that which we cannot see, feel, and touch. Now, beyond our physical realm, we can't touch and feel and understand ghosts, so we're scared of them. But within our physical realm, we worry about things that we can't see either, like parasites and fungi and bacteria and virus and prions that bring disease to us. And none of these are nice creatures, I can assure you of that. But we've made things worse. Now, I'm going to give you some nice pictures here just to keep you occupied. The first slide here, you can see elephantitis, the other side, the pinworm at the bottom. The other one would be the one that's really nasty is Anisakis. That's on the bottom left-hand corner. It's a small little worm that ends up, that's in fish. That's my area. That's in fish, ends up in your intestine, gives you terrible stomach aches. It's only a couple of cm long. Now they can happily live in your intestines forever. And the trouble is that there's no medication for it. Once you're infected by it, you have to actually do surgery to get rid of it. So what I would suggest is don't eat raw fish, ever. Of course, you have the others, the dust mites and then pinworms, and the one that's blue dot that looks very pretty in the center, like somebody's skirt, is actually the worst of the parasitic infections that hits man, and that's the what do you call it, Plasmodium, and the Plasmodium is what causes malaria. I'll come back to this anyway because we have messed this up as well. The other thing that we're frightened of is fungi. I got some nice pictures here. I know it's going to gross you all out. That's the whole idea. If I don't gross you out, you won't stay awake. So you can see all these pictures of ringworm and thrush. Thrush is a tongue fungus. And the fungus will hit you when you, what do you call it, if you're, especially if you're low in your immunity. They're all waiting out there. By the way, right now, these fungi are on your skin, in your tongue, everywhere. And it is your immune system that actually keeps them at bay. So don't get cocky that you don't have a fungus. It's just a matter of time if you don't look after yourself. And of course, we talk about bacteria. And we know bacteria, well, there's no need for me to explain this. We all know that they are supposedly the biggest offender against human health. They are unicellular most of the time, and they take advantage again, like fungi, they take advantage of our internal ecology. That means what we maintain inside. These guys just wait till we screw it up, and then they come in and they take advantage of us. Okay, so we have, next is a virus. I've got some nice pictures of virus here. And of course, the right-hand side is the one that you see every day in Star newspaper. There you have the coronavirus standing there in front of you. And that's what actually brought this whole topic about. Because everybody says, oh God, I've got virus, I got a virus fever, I got a virus this, a virus that. Nobody really understands how valuable viruses are to us. So anyway, I'm going to come to that a little later. But I want to point out something. Viruses are not living, at least not by human definition. They are not capable of independent existence. They hijack cells and take over their genetic mechanism, and then from there they reproduce, and then they then dissipate, and then they affect other cells. Now, the interesting thing about viruses is you can take these constituents, put them in separate bottles or separate containers, and a couple of years later put them together, they reform as viruses. Now, you can't do that with human beings, unfortunately. And the other thing is, you have, most of them have RNA, only RNA. Okay, what is RNA? RNA, if you have DNA, the DNA is like the floor plan of your building or your house or whatever. RNA is a contractor who actually generates the proteins that makes the structure, makes the components of the structure. Now, these guys, many of them don't have a DNA, they have only RNA, and some of them have DNA only single strand, whereas the full DNA is actually 2 strands, working in the usual, helix pattern. No, but they don't have that. It's very simplified kind of structure. And in fact, from a standpoint of the way we define life, this is not life. This is not considered living. So if you say viruses are living, it's wrong. Viruses are, they're seen as rogue proteins. But that's our definition as humans. The reality is it still comes from nature. Okay? Viruses have always been around in nature. It's part of nature. Now, this is prions. Now, the prions are something that do exist in nature, but we make them pathogens. And this is a picture, 2 pictures I wanted to show you, because prions are very unusual. They are just folded proteins, misfolded proteins. And what they do is they go into your body, and then they create other similar proteins. They misfold them as well. They create analogs, and those analogs end up feeding on your brain. And so you can see on the right a brain tissue of a person who suffers from encephalopathy, and what happens, what they call spongiform encephalopathy. And most of you will know spongiform encephalopathy, except you call it mad cow disease, right? Because that's when it became a really big issue. And what happens is, you see all the holes in it. That's why your brain ends up like a sponge. On the left-hand side is an image of the glial cells. The glial cells are communicative cells in the brain. And what happens is that they are normally rounded. And what happens is they assume the star-shaped, roughly star-shaped, and they're called astroglial cells. And once you have that, I'm afraid this all the Panadol in the world is not going to work. You're going to end up like the mad cow. Okay, now the next thing I would like to point out before I come to the next slide is what is the character of Mother Nature. And I need to go back to that, because I've got to point out to you what happens where, we are concerned, how we modify nature. Now, first thing is, we must understand about Mother Nature is diversity rocks. Whatever we see, wherever we see natural things, a natural environment, we see a diversity of fauna, flora, and flora and fauna. That means all kinds of animals, all kinds of birds, all kinds of organisms live in it, and all kinds of plants. Now, look at the way we've handled nature. We've taken from nature the plants. On the left-hand side is a banana plantation from Costa Rica. Then we have on the right on the right top would be a rubber plantation in Vietnam, and below that would be something from home, which is a oil palm plantation. No diversity allowed, because diversity will take away the nutrients. We fear that diversity will take away the nutrients and everything else we want in terms of economic return. So economics becomes a big driver for the way we look at nature. It isn't worthwhile keeping it, don't keep it. Just get this out and let's keep what is important, and then we challenge Mother Nature. That's the worst part of it. Now, the other thing about Mother Nature, you must understand, nothing is immortal. Nothing is immortal. Everything has a shelf life, and balance is everything. And the third thing is adaptability. Nature's dynamic, it never fixed. We go through history of nature on Earth at least, and we can see that there were animals and plants that existed and they disappeared. New animals and plants took their place. Some could not adapt, some could adapt, but changed form. So adaptability is very, very important. There is nothing more changeless than change. Now, what do we do when we do something like this? We challenge Mother Nature. Once we have this, we'll have a disease problem. Because you know why? We are not the only ones in this environment. You see these three pictures? The funguses are, fungi are there, bacteria are there, the viruses are there, and they take one good look at this and say, listen, in nature, when you have diversity and you have all these pathogens that are host specific, I can only attack one type of plant at a time. Now I got this huge area of same plants that I can attack and I can enjoy myself. Now you must understand, when I say talk about fungi, they are organisms like us. They want to survive, they want to grow, they want to sustain. Now what they're going to do is look at this environment and say, this is a great place. Hey, this is paradise, man. I've got one type of plant for which I'm adapted, and I can take this whole huge acreage and I can enjoy myself. Now, what happens then is we make a terrible mistake. We see this in terms of a pathogen-host relationship. I got a rubber tree, I got a disease, the disease is killing my rubber tree, so I must look at it in terms of, say, the pathogen that's killing my rubber tree and the rubber tree itself. So what I do is I modify the rubber tree genetically, or else, if it's a fungicide, for example, I talk about using herbicides. Now, all these solutions are pathogen host relationship. I look at pathogens in relation to its host, try to kill the pathogen, try to improve the host. I don't look at it in terms of the overall dynamics of a disease. This would cover its external environment, that means wherever the pathogen comes from, and its internal environment. We never look at the internal environment. We tend to look at external environment. And that's true of us as humans as well. We tend to look at a disease in terms of saying, okay, I need to take an antibiotic and cure the disease, rather than asking the question, what caused that pathogen to invade us in the first place? We never ask that question. We say, okay, I've got a headache, I take a Panadol. I've got a cold, I take an Actifed, it's an antihistamine. But we didn't ask, why is it the rhinovirus was able to affect us in the first place? We never asked this question. And that has to do with our internal environment, which we never pay attention to. Now, this is a typical forest scene. Now, I've taken this, one is the Amazon forest, one is the local forest. By the way, the left-hand side, top image is from Frim in Kapong. If you haven't gone there, you've lost a great deal of experience in this. And you can see the diversity of life that nature engenders. And yet we do not appreciate this diversity. We do not see this diversity as being fundamental to the way our environment exists. Now, at this point in time, I must ask you, we are all caught up with this COVID-19, and we say, hey, COVID-19 is one hell of an epidemic. But actually, it occurs all the time. Epidemics, pandemics, whatever you want to call it, happen all the time. Now, you may not realize it, but the amphibian epidemic of the chytrid fungal pathogen, the Bacterochytrium dendrobratis, actually occurred in the 90s. Throughout the world, it's a pandemic. It drove 9 species of amphibians into extinction. And now, you know, in Malay, you have this saying, you know, mati kata. You know, it's dead like a frog. I mean, like as if a frog is no big deal that you find it dead on the side of the road. Now you don't find frogs. There are no frogs. The frogs have all been decimated by this epidemic, this pandemic. Now, Ebola, we always talk about Ebola as being a human disease, but actually it also occurs in primates. And there's been heavy losses of chimpanzees to Ebola. The devil facial tumor disease is actually it's a disease that has hit the Tasmanian devil, and it's a major problem with those animals. Now, these epidemics occur all the time. This is Mother Nature's mechanism to force change and adaptation. So, no big deal. It happens all the time. But what we have done is accelerated. We have brought tuberculosis into the picture. Tuberculosis is actually spread because of proximity of people, because we brought people into cities, we brought them into communities where people live next to each other. Tuberculosis spread. We gave it the opportunity. Nipah virus didn't exist until a bat dropped, I mean, it came from bats, no doubt, but it jumped species into pigs. And if you saw the pig farms in Bukit Pelando, when this occurred, the Nipah virus occurred, you would be horrified. You don't see these farms right now because most of them are closed, but I was serving in Negeri Sembilan at the time, and I can tell you some of the pictures I've got are abysmal. The sanitation, the manner the pigs were held, the manner the pigs were treated, it was unbelievable. You know, one of the things that I once saw that really turned me off is when I went to a farm, and that was a pig farm that was also growing fish. And what I saw was this carcass of a pig in the pond. And the carcass of the pig started moving. And I was so surprised. And suddenly there's this grass carp, this fish, that is sticking its head through its belly. It was eaten right through it. That's how they did it. They took the carcass and threw it in the pond and let the fish eat it. That kind of thing is a challenge to proper sanitation and animal husbandry. And what we did, we allowed it to occur. We allowed it to occur. So the bat, actually, you can't blame the bat or the virus. When we create the situation where the virus is actually jumping species and jumping to us, then 100 over people died of Nipah. But when you go back to the root of it, we created that situation. Ebola came from what do you call it, primates, and should have remained with primates, but we insisted on eating chimpanzees. So we didn't eat them properly, we didn't clean them properly, we didn't process them properly, and we ended up the same disease they had. Dengue. You say, why is human-induced dengue? Dengue is a virus, it's not a bacteria, sorry. It's a virus, and what we did for dengue is that we imported, accidentally perhaps, the vector. We didn't have dengue in this country, we had malaria. We had filariasis. You know, the first picture I showed you, the big thick thighs and thick legs. We had filariasis, but we didn't have dengue. Dengue comes in urban areas, and it comes because we have the Aedes mosquito. Now, the Aedes albopictus and the Aedes mosquito, basically the albopictus is now also carrying the virus. They survive they proliferate in urban areas. Now, who created the environment? We did. Who brought them in? We did. All this, we brought them in from Africa. They were not supposed to be here. But since you decided, or humans decided, hey, we're going to give you the time of your life, we're going to give you this great resort area where you can proliferate and you can grow, and we give you all these people living next to each other that you can infect. These guys are really happy. You made a lot of mosquitoes happy. And I say you, not you personally, but we as humans did that. Now, I'm going to tell you something else that you may not know, but this is more on animals. That's going on right now. One is TR4. Now, it's also known as a Panama virus, but in fact, it's not a virus, it's a fungi. Now, I showed you a picture earlier on of the Costa Rican banana industry. Nothing but bananas. Not really nothing but bananas. It's all the Cavendish, which is in this country, that comes in as Montel. Now, the Cavendish banana was actually replaced an earlier version called Gros Michel, which is also a banana variety that was grown. Now, bananas, don't use seeds. They all use suckers. So basically, you have all of this, no genetic variation, all of them are clones of each other. And you have thousands of acres of this stuff. Now, what did you expect? When this Panama fungi came out, it was a great holiday for them, and there's so much for them to attack. Now, TR4 is now did start in South America. It is now spread to Africa, to Asia, and they expect that Cavendish will become extinct as the Gros Michel before it. There's no way you can stop this because there is no cure. There is no way you can stop this. Now, we in Malaysia and actually in Southeast Asia are quite, I wouldn't say immune. We are going to be hit by the Panama virus. It's already in the Philippines. But the good news is we eat a variety of bananas. So this banana is specific for the Cavendish. But if you really want, like Montel, which frankly I think is bland in its taste, please eat it now because you're not going to see it much longer. The other epidemic, the Panama is a pandemic because it's throughout the world. One is an epidemic that is starting from China, and it's actually moving into this region, is the shrimp decapod iridescent virus 1, which hits shrimp farms. And again, we have no cure, we have no treatment, we have got nothing going for them, and the mortalities are very high. The shrimp industry is simply on its toes waiting for this to come here, and once it comes here, you can't do very much about it. Now, you'll say, why don't you prevent it from coming in? You can do that up to a point. We can check each, but when people bring in shrimp, you can't check each and every shrimp. It just comes in through one. All it needs is just one animal to have it, and you put it in the pond, and next thing you know, everything else is problematical. Why does it happen? Because in nature, you have several species of shrimp living with each other. Now, in shrimp farming, you have one species of shrimp, and you have them at a density of 1.2 to 1.3 million per hectare. When you have a large population of the same kind of species in one confined area, you have disease potential. Now, this one should remind you of the way we have built our cities. We have not chosen to separate ourselves. We've not chosen to distribute ourselves. We've chosen to actually come together. And we have now become like shrimp farms. And if we have one day a virus that comes and hits us like the coronavirus has, we all sit down and panic. But we have created the very environment in which these things proliferate and are successful. Then we have the African swine flu, which is now in China and almost decimated the swine flu, the pig industry there, the swine industry there. And everybody again in this part of the world are on their toes trying to prevent the swine flu from coming in. And if it comes in, then those who enjoy pork will suddenly see the fact that you can't, your pig population is going to be decimated. Now, this is what I mean by cities. This is a totally artificial environment, and you must understand that all these things you can't blame them. You can't blame the virus or the fungi. Their motive is to survive in a changing environment. Their motive is to sustain and survive. Now, you have changed the fundamental environment. None of these pictures all look very nice, nice city, right? Nice lights and all that. But none of them represent a natural environment. None of us were adapted to survive in this environment. So we will then have to suffer the consequences. Okay? And doing what we have done is the limited environment that these pathogens in fact live in, how would have we made it worse? First thing, by destroying forests. Pathogens that were in the forest should have remained in the forest. But we have cleared the forest, and where do they go? And this comes back to the species that malaria. Now, malaria, if you go traditionally, it was caused by a parasite called Plasmodium falciparum. But in Sabah, they've discovered other species of what do you call the Plasmodium that have come from newly cleared areas, newly cleared jungle areas. Now, this Plasmodium never intended to what do you call it, affect humans. But what we did was we got rid of their homes and we invited them to ours. And so, can't blame them. You have to blame the way humans have pursued this. And we did this by challenging Mother Nature, not by trying to live with it. Urbanization, what you see here, is also a major issue. Urbanization, I'm not talking mental health and all that comes with urbanization. I'm just talking about disease. And in terms of disease, we brought dengue with us. We made dengue comfortable here. And we have compromised biodiversity and its needs. Like in prions, the problem with prions is that we fed a ruminant like sheep and cattle with dead cattle meat, of carcasses of dead cattle. And when we ate dead cattle or dead sheep, and when they ate it, this actually stimulated a protein that was in the brain mainly for memory, but it turns out we stimulated its pathogenic instincts. And next thing you know, right now, you have mad cow disease. Now, mad cow disease, at one time, of course, everybody used to cite it. It's not as serious as it used to be. It's a rare disease. But, I say that this 100% came from us. We created every part of its environment in which it survives. Okay, can we live without all these organisms? Okay, no disease, no need for medicine, right? Happy. The pharmaceutical industry is totally screwed. But, parasites live as part of an environment. You can't get rid of them. Fungi, many of them species benefit to us. They make bread, they make dosa, they make beer. So we say to a fungi, the good fungi and bad fungi. We do all this as a fallacious kind of distinction. Fungi or bacteria, whether you say good or bad, they're not intrinsically good or bad. They do what they need to do. That's about what it is. And we create the environment in which they proliferate. So it's back to us, not to them. Now, virus, this now comes back to the thrust of what I'm trying to present today. They are the current bad boy of the microbial world. Nobody talks about good virus and bad virus. Everybody talks about virus. And I got a virus fever, I got a virus, I've come down with a virus. Nobody says, hey, there are good viruses around, don't worry about it. Nobody there. And of course, we have prions and we are the bad boys, as I said. There's no cure, there's no adaptability, and we created this monster. But I'm coming down to viruses next, okay? Now, nature is not unfair, okay? Viruses have been around since very earliest times. It's not something that just popped out of the, out of the woodwork. And what we have done is, we have failed to understand this, I won't say organism, since it's not this entity. Now, Mother Nature is not capricious. And viruses have their weaknesses. Now, they are functionally mortal. That means from a functional standpoint, nature, then you can never say viruses are killed. I know people use that as a sort of shorthand, but the reality is viruses are not invincible, and from a functional standpoint, we can denature the protein and stop it from doing what it does. Now, what can we do? This one thing is UV. And in this country, the best source of UV is sunlight. We've got plenty of sunlight, plenty of UV coming down, and UV here is ultraviolet, and ultraviolet will kill viruses. So spend time in the sun, the viruses on your skin good. Don't listen to Trump. You can't put the UV inside yourself, but you can put the UV outside yourself. Second thing is heat. Simple thing. Heat will kill viruses. Okay? You boil your water, boil your, heat your food, your viruses die. Disinfectants, and particularly soap. Soap will kill viruses. I am not coming down to something that's what do you call it, rocket science, huh? Simple things. Now, the other thing is viruses are active only a limited time outside their host. Now, depends upon the virus. Some viruses last you just minutes. Some viruses like smallpox used to last you quite a long time. But in both cases, they did not last the distance. They could not go very far before they infected somebody else. So like smallpox, you actually had to be in touch with the fluids of the person who had smallpox, or you had to be close to them so that you could breathe their droplets that come out of their nose and their mouth. So it's droplet infection because the virus travels through the phlegm or the sputum, and it infects something else. Now, if you keep your distance, the virus does not affect you because it dies before that or falls down before that and cannot affect you. So when they tell you, please spend more time in the sun, use soap and wash your hands, and keep your distance from other people, social distancing. These are things your grandmother taught you, and they are as valid today as they were at one time, simply because viruses have a limitation. And this Mother Nature did this. I'm not going to make an invincible entity. I'm going to give it the same failings that I give others, so they will have to struggle to survive. They will have to adapt to survive. And that is in the nature of viruses. So it is very easy to outwit a virus. Okay, so as long as we are careful and we are constantly aware of the fact that our internal environment is being challenged by an external environment, and we take the appropriate action by preventing droplet infection, by sanitizing our hands. No need to put all these chemicals on, you just use soap. That's one of the best that you can do. And you keep your distance from other people. You're practically, you can stop a whole epidemic from occurring. Okay? Internally, viruses are not also invincible. They go into your body, you have antibodies, you have got T cells that swallow them and destroy them. So listen, being a virus is not fun, okay? I mean, it's not like I got up this morning, hey, today, who am I going to infect? No, it's stuff that it is a situation where viruses have to struggle to survive like every other creature, every other entity living otherwise in this world. And therefore, we must understand why it is that way, and why viruses are like other organisms, other living things are, well, we call it non-living, but other entities in this world that arise from Mother Nature. Why viruses are valuable? No, nobody says good viruses, right? Now, this is a picture of a bacteriophage. Now, bacteriophages are basically viruses that attack bacteria. Now, they don't attack us, but they kill bacteria. And this is a picture of all these viruses hanging around a bacterial cell and killing them. Now, if you don't have these viruses, you will have bacteria proliferating, right? So again, there are good viruses. There are viruses that are valuable to us, but they're valuable in another way. Now, this is a picture that you've probably seen everywhere, and this is so wrong. This is so wrong. It shows a linear progression from a chimpanzee to a man. It never worked that way. It was a bloody mess. You had a lot of dead ends. You had actually it's a web where we moved from not a chimpanzee, from a precursor, a primate precursor. They went by their own line. They became Australopithecines. They went to the Homo, and in Homo we had Homo erectus, we had Homo neanderthalis, we have Homo denisovans. We had, even until 12,000 years ago, we had the Homo florenensis. We had a whole range of human species, of which the Homo sapiens is the one that survives to this day. So this linear progression from chimpanzee to human is wrong to begin with. But what changed us? What made us from all these, this lower level primates? I hate to say this lower level primates, but basically this thing like Australopithecus, turn into something else, and then turn into Homo, and then into Homo sapiens. Now, one of the things that it's very little understood is that viruses play a genetic substantiation in our evolution. About 8% of human DNA comes from viruses inserted in our genomes in the distant past. So, in many cases, the genomes of pre-human ancestors millions of years ago. Most of these viral genes come from retroviruses, RNA viruses that insert DNA copies into their own genes into the genomes they infect. So, this comes from viruses. Now, if we didn't have the viruses, we'd probably be somewhere where the chimpanzees still were, or where the Australopithecines still were. But see, this shows a progression, but in reality, it is spasmodic. You'll have some species suddenly growing, disappearing, another one jumping up, and then until the Cro-Magnon man from 50,000 years ago, they really weren't very smart. They were just brutish little creatures that run around the countryside, banging people on the head on the club with the clubs and throwing spears. And that's about all we could do. That we can come down being thinking animals came very suddenly. Did it come from viruses that allowed this jump to occur? Could very well have been. We don't know exactly what caused it, but we know it happened. And we know that it has happened in the past. Moving from one to another has not been an easy role. It has not been an easy path. And it has been one where viruses played a role. So let's not be nasty about viruses. Mother Nature has a role for them. And that role is far, far more critical than what we ascribe to them today. We forever condemn them. We forever say viruses, we shouldn't have them. But really, all the answers in terms of managing viruses, in terms of managing the environment in which viruses survive, proliferate, are we create it. We are the ones who actually allow it to become the nuisance that it has become. And in summary, don't hate viruses. They are good viruses as well. See them as part of a natural system, not as aliens. Understand their weaknesses. They cannot live long outside a host. They cannot transfer through body fluids. They can travel through body fluids. So you wear gloves, wear masks. And they can come through physical contact, wash frequently. Basic things your grandmother used to tell you. Just go back to that. And I want to do this slide because I follow this particular website called School of Life. It's a global organization that has got very interesting essays written on nature. And I want to quote this particular sentence from an essay I read recently, that modernity is founded on the notion that we can live through willpower and ingenuity, change our circumstances. We can divert rivers, transform our fortunes, invent miraculous machinery, and start new lives on other continents. But there are laws of nature we can't resist. And no amount of machinery or eloquence or money or power will overcome. An emperor and a typhoon are as vulnerable as a tramp before the mechanisms of the natural world, who will grind us each one back to our cellular origins. And ladies and gentlemen, with that, thank you very much for your attention.
Mr. Gopinath, thank you very much for that. That was very interesting.
Okay, it's 40 minutes.
I do have a question. Maybe I would really appreciate it if you could. You already mentioned that not be killed, but can we go back to that point? And can you just elaborate or repeat about and whether soap can? I know you said they can't kill them, but what is the purpose of using soap? You know, if you don't kill a virus, go on to the
most viruses. Okay, there are two things that viruses will do for you. Sorry. Well, let me go back to this slide. Never mind. What you'll do is, in terms of soap, there are two things. First thing is, if your virus is on your head, then it's part of the oily layer that is on our skin all the time. This is the natural sebaceous oils that come into our skin externally, and they hide in there. When washing your hand with soap, you remove it, and you physically remove the virus. The other part is soap also oxidizes protein coat of many viruses, and you will lose those viruses. That means viruses will be denatured, and therefore they will not survive to infect anybody. So washing your hands is no small thing. It's very important. And your hands touch everything. They touch every surface that you see. And so your hands tend to be the gateway for a lot of infections. So the soap is an important part. Keep your hands clean, or you wear gloves. That's the other part of it. You can wear gloves, but the gloves also get dirty. So gloves also have to be maintained. So you always have to be mindful that your hands are a gateway for a lot of your infections, viral infections are coming.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to ask a question. I like that very much.
Sorry, I didn't catch that. You're breaking up.
I'm breaking up. Can you hear me?
I can hear bits and pieces of you.
Bits pieces. Okay. You remember that?
No. Basically, because I didn't say it that way. I mean, your line, I can't hear you at all. I mean, not here. I can hear bits and pieces again.
Okay.
Where's our broadcasting specialist?
Right. Can you hear me now?
Not at all.
Is that better?
Now you're okay.
I'm better. Okay, fine.
No, you're back to breakup.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you when you say this, but when you start speaking, I'm not sure.
Try speaking. Try again. Okay.
Okay, try again.
Try again. Can you?
Yeah.
Try.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you when you say that sentence, but the moment you start speaking, it sort of breaks up. That's why.
Without the video. Okay. Just okay. Back. Sorry about that. You diversity. Back to that point, and how in jungle it's important, diverse.
Mm-hmm.
The flora. Now, what has happened in my area is that to a lot of urban people, and diverse, and within a year, now, my question to you is simple. How can I, living in a city, little world, become diverse?
Okay, that point. The thing is, my whole contention is that the way we pursue economic development is to actually downgrade our economic way we think. And I know as you as individual are caught up in something, and we as individuals are caught up. But our economic model throughout has been, how can I screw as much from the ground as I can? And therefore, I will go for monoculture. I will go for destruction of diversity. So that thinking, that fundamental thinking should first be changed. When I was looking at an article on African agriculture, traditional African culture, agriculture, the people who were cultivating originally in Africa rotated their crops. Then what they did was they were planting different crops different times. They were planting crops on a rotational basis. That means this year I'll grow one species of crop, next year next species of crop. These kind of things actually kept the disease down. Then we had this Western thinking, and I see this largely comes from Keynesian thinking that became the focus of economic growth in the West. That money comes first, and therefore what they did became there. For example, whole areas were open for tobacco. Whole areas were open for Then they have started getting disease problems. So in terms of what you can do is essentially in your little patch of garden, you can probably try and create some degree of diversity. But the problem is not you. It is us collectively as humans. It is us and what we have done and the way we think. It's all wrong. We cannot think in terms of just trying nature to be our economic slave. And economic slave point here.
Okay.
Did all that come through?
All right. Yes. Thank you. Next question I have is, after COVID-19, there is a strong awareness of virus. Do you feel this was an improvement on the way things did we go backwards? Did we regret? Did we go backwards? Did we regret? And we move forward now.
I am so cynical about this because you know why? People have short memories. And what will happen is there is an awareness right now. What do you call it? Vaccine comes out, everybody gets a vaccine, and they go back to the same old bad habits. So I am not confident that we will change simply because of COVID. You're forced to change. Even if you see COVID, we bring up this COVID issue. Reality is that they're catching people every day who don't see the importance of wearing a mask or washing their hands. That joker in Sivaganga in Kada, he's not a criminal. The guy just couldn't be bothered because he didn't see its significance or importance. And suddenly 7,000 people are in lockdown. So, it's this fundamental change in attitude. And it is not a change, actually, it's not something new. It's something that has always been advocated. It's traditionally been advocated among all in our traditions. We have just failed to just follow them. Now, will we continue following them? I don't know. If I see everything else, it's, I'm aware today, but lazy tomorrow.
Okay. Just today's papers, the groups that I made, they have mentioned that, article in the Star about Malaysia having more than 1,000 viruses and so on and so forth. The question that we have is it possible to prepare for the next virus outbreak? I know about hygiene, the 3 that you mentioned, but the specific question is, can we prepare for the next?
No, because we don't know where it comes from. Imagine all these organisms I spoke about, or these organism viruses that I spoke about, they're all out there. All they have to do is modify, and you don't know where it comes from. Now, this coronavirus, we really don't know where it comes from. I know they say it came from Wuhan and all that, but we're not clear on that either. We don't know where it comes from. We don't know how it acts. Can you imagine the history? Just let's not talk about 100 years ago. Let's talk about what we know about the COVID. The COVID started in 2019. First stages somewhere in November. And up to now, we are discovering new things about it. First, only older people are the ones that suffer the highest mortalities. Now you've got kids like 9 years old suffering it. First thing it was, then earlier on they said, listen, it affects only your respiratory system. Now they say it goes into your brain. So you don't know what you're dealing with. You don't know how it acts. You don't know how it behaves. You don't know fully. You may know bit by bit, but this thing bit by bit is cumulative. And we'll eventually know at which point we'll finish with it. But if, say, I know this, and as a consequence, I can prepare for the next one, no. Not really, not unless you go back to the basics. And the basics is simply sanitation. Keeping your distance from people, washing your hands, that's the only way you can keep it. like I pointed out, you're not immortal. Nobody's immortal. So we have to accept the point that one time or another we are going to end up with, like the poor banana Cavendish, the Cavendish banana. We're going to end up with the TR4, and we are not going. We're going to find it really difficult to fight that.
It's quite sad. I have a question. And actually two, but they are related. So the issue is currently in Japan with the mutated coronavirus. What does it mean? Mutated, and how do they multiply?
Sorry. How do viruses multiply? Again, you're breaking up, but let me reiterate the question: how they mutate and how they multiply. Now, mutation is a fundamental feature of any genetic entity. They've got a DNA, they've got an RNA. This they can change. This they change in relation to the challenges. So I infect X number of people like this, but I come across a barrier. Nature helps them cross that barrier by mutating. Remember, I said change is changeless. The need for change is changeless. It's always there. So we have changed. Like the last picture I showed, we have changed from the time that we first evolved to the time we're here now. Similarly, this change occurs even at a viral level, or at a bacterial level, or at a fungal level. They keep changing. They become different. They become virulent. They become more. Their character changes. Sometimes it goes the other way around. You can be a virulent virus, and suddenly you change, and you become a benign virus. That happens as well. So you're constantly changing, and when you have this mutation occurring as part of your genetic structure, then it becomes a question of what this change actually means. And in terms of how they reproduce more or less. You talk about viruses, they reproduce more or less similarly. They go into the cell, host cell, they then hijack their mechanism, their reproductive mechanisms, and they reproduce. That's the way they survive. So that part doesn't change. If that part changes, then they're no longer considered viruses, or else if they do change and they can't do it, they become extinct. Simple as that.
Thank one more question, which is if something we can make today to with viruses to live in harmony, what would it be?
Oh, good heavens, you don't want it to live with harmony. Because if they live with harmony, you will never do all the things that you're supposed to do. First thing is, you're looking at this too romantically. You know, it's not one day the virus will come and hold your hands and we all go dancing around the bush. That's a Tamil movie scene. Now, what you're going to do is, nature is not like that. Nature is a struggle to survive. Every creature struggles. That is the basis of evolution. The struggle to survive, to need to adapt. And in that process, you're going to have creatures that will going to cross your path. And the viruses are going to be like that. They're going to cross your path, as the bacteria, as the fungus. In fact, the last few pandemics, the one that hit the amphibians and the ones that hit the bananas, suggest to me perhaps in future, you might have to struggle with the virulent virus. There are a number of virulent viruses virulent fungus, and the number of virulent funguses that are already out in nature. They are funguses that are not, their infectivity is low. They don't infect you that easily, but they can get, one of the fungus is found in water and in polluted water, which we pollute, of course, and they can affect your brain. Now, this one, the infectivity is low because you have to have a low immune system. And then if you accidentally fall in this water and the pathogen is available, is there, it'll take advantage of this situation. But in future, it's not going to be a virus. It could be a fungus. It could be a pest. It could be it could be a parasite. You do not know. there is an amoeba that actually it's not found so much here, but it's found in temperate countries. And when the weather warms up a bit, again, climate change is us. It warms up a bit. This amoeba proliferates, and it's in freshwater lakes. So your lake can be very clean, but if you breathe this in, it again goes and it enters your brain. It's a flesh-eating amoeba. It'll eat your flesh, your brain tissue. So you have all of these nasties out there, but they're constantly adapting. They're constantly watching. They're constantly challenging. So no, harmony is not part of nature's way of looking at things. Balance, what nature looks for is balance. And when you start pushing balance out of the picture, you're going to mess up with the system. It is not harmony.
Okay. On that note, we have comment participant about being vegetarian. So his comment is vegetarian diet is best, and we should live in less congested areas and reduce consumption. Eat animals. So what gentleman would like to know is what's your this?
Okay,
will actually.
I didn't prepare myself for a talk on whether vegetarian and non-vegetarian is better. Okay, first thing is I want to go back to us as human beings, as the organisms. As human beings, we are omnivores. As omnivores, we were always very adaptable, which is why you find the human being, the Homo sapiens, in almost every climate, whether you are in close to the Arctic Circle or right down to the desert, we can survive. We survive because we can adapt, and we can adapt because we can eat a wide range of foods. So I'm sure vegetarianism has got its virtues, but I wouldn't go as far as to say it's the best diet. No, it all depends upon your circumstances. I was reading about this group of Inuit, what we used to call Eskimos, they call Inuit. Now, they're the correct name for them. In Greenland, and in Greenland, these people survive in one part of Greenland that's cold for most part of the year. They don't eat vegetables. Vegetables could not grow on that rocky area. They eat only, during summer, they may eat berries. But for most part, they eat seal. They're allowed to take 2 or 3 polar bears per year. They've got a quota. They eat fish. And they're allowed to take whales, small whales. Now, this is their life. Forever eating meat. And they survive. Now, they have adapted to that kind of diet. And to tell them, listen, you should be a vegetarian and you live longer and you live healthier, I don't think the evidence is out there to support that kind of look. So, it can work either way. If you're a vegetarian and you enjoy being a vegetarian, you derive benefits from being a vegetarian, by all means go that direction. I'm not going to be sanctimonious here and say, no, you must eat vegetarian and you'll be healthy. No, I don't think that is a foregone conclusion. Now, the other part was we stay together. This is the problem, the pictures I showed. You take people and put them in massive ghettos, I call them ghettos, all these multi-story flats. You're putting a large population, like, it's not like termites or ants, where they all live in a nest. But by the way, if I want to go back to basics again, no animal in the animal kingdom actually grooms itself more than ants. I don't know about termites so much, but ants groom themselves all the time. They groom themselves because of their proximity with other ants and proximity with the soil where they can pick up bacteria. So they're constantly cleaning themselves. Again, they didn't have a grandmother telling them this. This is built into their DNA. But it's this fundamental focus on sanitation that actually helps them survive in a group. So separation helps. Of course, you can't separate. We are social animals. We can't separate all the time. But we can be mindful that separation is important.
Okay. All right. It has been very informative. I shall remember my ants and balance. Thank you. That, like many of the others, everybody's learned a lot. Thank you also to the society, the center, the interfaith spiritual fellowship, and the organizing committee. Before we end, I'd like to say, as your thoughts, Mr. Gopinath, last words.
I'm sorry, the line didn't come through. You're asking me for some last words?
Yeah.
Yeah. My last words, I won't put it as last words. I hope to be say some more words some other time. What do you call it? The last slide that I presented encapsulates everything I wanted to say. No? Wait, let me go there. Okay, this one, closing sentiments. This its modernity is found in the notion that we can deliver through willpower and ingenuity, change our circumstances. We can divert rivers, transform our fortunes, invent miraculous machinery, or start new lives on other continents. But there are laws of nature that we can't resist, and no amount of machinery or eloquence or money or power will overcome. An emperor and a tycoon are as vulnerable as a tramp before the mechanisms of the natural world, who will grind each one of us back to our cellular origins. Now, the source of this is the School of Life, and I encourage you to go to that website. They've got some very, very good essays.
Very much. We've come to the end of our. Thank you, everybody, for participating.
Okay, right. Thanks.